had a lot of kind of conversations about the power of technology. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I am super optimistic.
Yeah?
100%, yeah.
There might be people here who might disagree with you.
The world is getting better. It is unquestionable. Like if you look, global middle class is growing. It's going to continue to grow. People are getting healthier. We're living longer. The long-term, big picture story is super positive, and technology drives that change. So, yeah, super optimistic.
Let's explore that. So, Noah Brier is the co-founder of Percolate. Percolate is a software platform for marketing. We can talk about that a little bit. But one of the reasons I've known Noah for a while, as some of you may know, and one of the reasons I wanted to speak to Noah is talk about creativity within the technology age. Yeah, we've seen all these. We saw Gatorade came on. We saw Uber talk about branding, and as a company, you interact with the kind of marketers of all sorts. What's happening within that space? What's happening within a marketer's job and role?
Well, I think the job keeps getting bigger. And again, I'm an optimist, and it'll keep coming out. But the job of a marketer continues to increase, right? There's more people to talk to. There's more people to sell things to. There are more people in the market. There are more ways to reach them. I think brands, people are it's taken us sort of 120 years, but I think, people are coming around on the value of brands and seeing just how important they really are. And, we're looking at people finally starting to sort of pull apart the pieces and understand that, what brand really does is allow you to, sell products at a premium and
when you say people, you mean people within companies and...
People within companies, yeah. Big organizations, I think, are coming around on the value of brand.
And so how is that kind of changing our functions, the way we work in the office, and even just kind of the future of work?
Well, I think it's changing in a couple ways. So I think one thing we're seeing is sort of the definition of marketing. I think this is kind of true of every function. You can say the same thing about IT and a lot of other pieces, but people are realizing that marketing and brand and communications and design is something that is it needs to be spread out throughout the organization, right? And I think people are experimenting with much more cross-functional teams, which in a lot of ways is what was originally intended when brand management was invented in the 30s at Procter & Gamble. They were trying to bring together a cross-functional team. I think we got a little bit narrow in there, but I think we're sort of trying to expand again. But yeah, I think a lot of it is about sort of recognizing, everything. I'd say a theme of the day, and probably a theme of the day over the last 10 years has been like all of the touch points are intersecting, right? It's increasingly difficult to kind of draw distinctions between what's retail and what's digital and what's anything else. And so in that, I think as a marketer, you are trying to sort of not just kind of build experiences and tell stories, I think, that are kind of cohesive and linear, but you're also just accepting that sort of people are going to experience the brand in lots of different ways. And so, no matter which, whether they choose 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, or, they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they experience that way, the story works, it holds together.
I mean, you have all these different options, but at some point, someone's got to take a step back and think about what is the strategy, how do we shape all this? I mean, what is the role of strategy today within an organization?
So, I think, in my mind, and I've thought a lot about this. I used to run a strategy department before starting a software company. Strategy to me is about how to make good decisions, a framework for decision making. And I think we got a little off track with strategy for a little while because it became about sort of building the plan. It became about sort of describing every step along the way and exactly the experience someone should have. I think the role of strategy is increasingly about sort of laying the foundation. So you're trying to, as the world becomes more complex, as you have global organizations and people need to make decisions all over the place and they need to make those decisions independently, I think the role of strategy is to help people make those decisions independently. It's not to tell them what those decisions should be, it's to kind of give them a framework for thinking. So what are the questions I should ask myself if I'm launching a product in Beijing versus France? I think that to me is sort of how strategy works.
But at the same time, whilst we have that happening, we have all these systems, we have this software, which is like doing the job of marketers, doing this programmatic stuff, or seems to be to me. doing the stuff of marketers? I mean, is that kind of impacting creativity? Is it kind of reducing their role to kind of?
Well, so I think, and again, there's a sort of like optimist pessimist take on this. And I think there is a large portion of sort of people that are in the marketing technology space that believe that the answer is that computers should do all the creative work and that they're somehow magically going to figure out what's going to emotionally resonate with people. I myself am fairly skeptical of that thesis, and I think where you see software really driving value, and you see it in the rest of the organization, like, you know, when you guys are coming up with a new report, you share documents around, right? And what that does is it eliminates the parts of your job that provide a lot less value, right? So somebody used to have to go and print something out for you to read and edit and make sure that it was all, now you can just sort of go back and forth and collaborate in real time, and ideally that gives you more time to think and provide sort of bigger value. I think it's the same when you look at marketing. So to me, I think of everything along, I call it a variance spectrum, and the idea is basically you can kind of chart all of the different parts of marketing based on how variant the output is. So if you're brainstorming, the output should be 100% variance, right? It should be totally new ideas. If you're an alcohol brand and you need to get legal reviews to ensure that somebody under the age of 25 isn't in your ad, that's zero variance. You don't screw around with that. To me, what you want to do and where software and technology is really powerful is taking that stuff that's low variance and just automating it, right? Like, you'd rather not be involved chasing down the person, the lawyer, to make sure that nobody appears to be under 25. You'd rather be doing the brainstorming, leading the creative development. And so I think that's really to me, that's the way I think about software, is sort of how do you take as much of the stuff on the left side of that variance spectrum, the really low, the much less strategic work, the sort of more like pushing papers around, and give that to software and tools, and open up the right side, which is where the creative work happens, and ideally open up more brain space.
So again, it kind of brings me back to this idea of the future of work, and even the future of business, and kind of building these kind of new organizations. How do you kind of see, what's the opportunity there?
Well, so, I mean, I think there's, on one side, the opportunity, and I was out at the University of Montana. I teach a class there every year, and one of the things I was saying about sort of jobs is, I think understanding where your job is on that spectrum is really important, and the further you are to the right, the safer it is, right? The sort of more the creative and strategic the work is. Obviously, there's also a role in building the systems and sort of helping to automate and take some of those pieces that, you know, are currently, they are more of the paper pushing pieces. But I think, you know, the thing that we still do uniquely, amazingly, is be creative. It's sort of come up with new ideas within the set of constraints that we're given.
How do you build that into like an organizational structure or into processes?
I think the way you build it into an organizational structure is at the very bottom. Like, to me, creativity is, so my definition of creativity, which is not mine, I sort of took it from what seems to be the body of knowledge about it, is basically creativity is about novelty within a set of constraints, right?
Okay.
And so I think, you know, on one side, the way you build it into an organization is you do a really good job of describing what the constraints are and what they aren't. You know, I think we spend a lot of time setting the rules, but when we set the rules, we don't say, well, these are all the rules, and then you can throw away all the rest. Because if you're a creative person, the very most damaging thing that happens is when you go and do something and put together some work that you think is brilliant, that fit into all the constraints you were given in the brief, and then you delivered at the end and they were like, we forgot to tell you that we hate the color yellow, and your entire thing is yellow. And you're like, that would
ever
be
happen to you?
really awesome to know about that at the beginning. So I think, you know, again, the one piece of that to me, and this is sort of very organizational, is to acknowledge that, you know, rules need to exist on both sides, right? They exist within the person who's producing the work and within the person who's approving it. To me, the one other piece on creativity, which I think is particularly important, I was having this conversation yesterday, is I think you have to have an organization. I think you have to encourage people to break rules in your organization, which is actually an incredibly hard thing to convince people to do. But if your rules don't evolve, that's how companies die, right? Like,
okay, that's interesting.
There are companies that, you know, if you look at sort of the cash register industry, right? Like, there were companies that for a long time said that a cash register had to be physical, and then companies came along and said, well, like, everybody's got iPads, that seems like a perfectly acceptable cash register. And those companies that had that rule, it took them too long to sort of catch up. And so if you don't encourage people to break those and then record and understand which rules have been broken effectively and try to get rid of them. I just think it's sort of this constant process of looking at those.
So there's this kind of analysis, refinement, or is that what you're trying to
talk
about?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and again, it goes to sort of creative and process and building it into organizations. We do a lot of analysis of the final product, right? I think about this in marketing a lot. In marketing, what we do is we look at the final packaged piece and we say, how did it perform, right? Mm-hmm. Like if it's a banner ad, we say, how did that banner ad do? We never look at the process that went into producing the ad. So like, what were the brand rules that were broken to make this great ad? We don't look at that piece. We don't take that away. We just sort of say, oh, well, this, we look at the final product. If you even look at, the creativity awards and the advertising awards, we judge the final piece. We don't judge the sort of process that went into it. And that to me is, if we're not looking back at that, that's the only way to recreate great creative work. Because ultimately, I think what we forget is that we're not just trying to do one piece of creative work. Mm-hmm. We're trying to do creative work over and over again, right? Like do
you think you can achieve creativity at scale? Is that, or I think at some point you just become a big monster and you have to just do stuff?
Companies clearly achieve it, right? Mm-hmm. You have companies who come here and present different incredible work year after year. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's possible you can produce it at scale. There are some best-in-class companies. It's hard, though, because I think scale is about repeatability and creativity is about novelty and newness, and those two things are kind of opposite.
Yeah, and newness is interesting for me, the idea of kind of invention versus innovation. I know you've been thinking about that a little bit, but what do we need in business? Do we need to invent? And what is the difference between invention and innovation?
So I think we need both. So this is, again, not my ideas. I stole them from, this one is Joseph Schumpeter, the early 20th century Austrian economist. So he said that invention is the sort of act of making a new thing, and it's totally disconnected from actually kind of finding business value in it. And innovation is the commercialization of an invention, right? And it's totally disconnected from the actual original making of the thing. Every company is built on innovation, right? And he talked, entrepreneurs innovate. They sometimes are inventors too, but mostly what entrepreneurs are is they find something that has a commercial opportunity and they sort of realize how to take advantage of that commercial opportunity. I think companies without a doubt have to innovate, right? Like mm-hmm. that idea, you have to be able to take advantage of new technologies and find ways to bring them to market. But I think if you look at the longest lasting companies, they've also figured out how to invent, right? And so if you look at someone like GE and their R&D lab and mm-hmm. the sort of companies that have really managed to make it all the way through, they haven't just sort of innovated, they've also, I think,
you think companies can predict the future, or people can predict the future?
I do.
You do?
I do think that companies and people can predict the future. I mean, I don't think in a sort of crystal ball, like I'll tell you what's going to be here mm-hmm. next year, but I think, there's economists, as an example, are an entire field built on predicting the future, right? Yeah. Like you look at the past, you understand what happened. One of my personal favorites is there's a Venezuelan economist named Carlota Perez who has a theory of how technology moves in these 50 or 60 year long waves. And you start with this wave that she calls installation, where you sort of put the infrastructure in place, and then you have a crash where people are sort of too excited about what it might do, and then it can't live up to the hype. And then you have a deployment phase, and that's where you realize all of the sort of real big gains. And so mm-hmm. she says 1910 to 1970. You look at 1910 to 1930, that's installation of
so it's
roads.
The hype curve extended over.
It's the hype curve extended. And so in her theory, mm-hmm. Which is again my very optimistic take, 1970, the invention of microprocessor, 1970 to 2000 is the installation of software and hardware and the internet and like all this stuff. And then in 2000, we have these companies that are on the stock market and worth tons of money, but there's nobody on the internet yet. And so we crash, and we crash for a really long time. And she actually thinks the housing crisis was part of it. But then you come out the other side, and we're in the deployment phase where actually now, by the end of the decade, there'll be 6 billion people on the internet. Like that's real. That's not, the 100 million or however many there were when companies were worth all that money in 1998.
We're running out of time. Let's just quickly wrap up and talk about, let's go back to your company and talk about Percolate a little bit.
Yeah.
It's been quite a meteoric rise as well. Remind me, so as it is a software company that services marketers, I mean, what's the change you've seen in that kind of 4 or 5 years you've been running that company?
Sure, yeah. So 5 years. We started in 2011, and we call it the system of record for marketing. So basically, it's sort of all the infrastructure and plumbing for managing marketing workflow and giving you visibility into what's happening. I think what I've seen is it's been a really fun experience for me from lots of different directions. I think I have gotten the chance, one, to work with engineers and have become sort of very engineering biased. I think in my world of advertising, I spent a lot of time with designers, and I became very design biased, and I still deeply believe in design, but I have to say, after spending 5 years with engineers, I would call design a subset of systems theory, and so I'd give the sort of systems the top. But for me, the biggest change and the sort of most interesting thing has been, when you start a company, you are in charge of building a product. Like, you're responsible. I was writing code at the beginning, which I was not very good at, but I made it work. As you grow, your job, if you're a CEO, your job becomes, how do you build a system that can build systems, right? Like, how do you build a company that can actually come up with products, right? And that's sort of that's the system that I'm left to build. And so that's why I sort of spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. And I think as you grow, you realize how big companies become big, slow companies, because you see the things starting to pick up. And to me, it's really about sort of continuing to focus back. I'm sort of maniacal about the idea that we should solve the underlying issue, not the sort of symptom. And to me, the way you solve the underlying issues is with clarity and alignment on values and brand and like those sorts of things. Like, when somebody makes a bad decision, to me, it's because we didn't make it clear enough what the brand meant and what the values were, right? It's not their fault for making a bad decision. We have to reinforce that thing at the bottom, right? And that to me is that's where brand becomes really transformative, is when it helps everyone in an organization make decisions in a way that are aligned.
That's wonderful. You put this into a book yet?
You should been busy.
I could talk to you for all afternoon, but a few other people lined up. Please thank Noah Brier, Percolate.